Welcome to the Marketecture podcast. I'm Ari Paparo. Today, Eric is off. He's at spring break, which I presume has something to do with his kids and not with him in a Speedo in Daytona Beach. But if you wanted one of your Marketecture hosts to be in a Speedo, he would definitely be your choice. Instead, I've got a great set of guests today. We're going to go deep on what it means to be a publisher nowadays. So we have my old friend, Matt Goldstein, otherwise known as MSG, and Rich Caccappolo, the CEO of DMG Media. Matt and Rich, thanks for being here.
Yeah, it's a great honor to speak to you at any time. It's great to be here on your podcast. To follow in the footsteps of some of your previous guests is really cool.
The funny thing about this podcast is literally all the guests know each other. I even saw Matt Barish on the street the other day, and he gave me a hard time for both not having him on the podcast and also talking about him endlessly. So, hey, Matt, we're name-checking you again. So let's talk with Matt Goldstein. So you are a veteran of ad tech, of publishing, and a lot of people probably know you from your interesting, quirky newsletter, which is called What I Saw Happen. Tell us about What I Saw Happen and who reads it, what's it about, and how you got started doing it.
It all started 8 years ago when I was working for consulting. I've been doing that for 13 and a half years, working for PulsePoint. And I actually went back in Gmail and found the newsletter, and I sent it out to the 10 executives who work there. And it was basically 10 bullet points from Q3 2015. And I reread those 10 bullet points, and I'm kind of embarrassed how bad they are. No, I have it right here in front of me. It's like viewability, publishers try to get smarter about indirect CPM, native continues to thrive. It's like embarrassingly bad.
Just because it's obvious doesn't mean it's not true.
Oh, I know. And then I found one from a year later, and I started breaking it out. Here's Facebook and Google. Here's the marketers. Here's publishers, and here's other stuff. And fast forward to today, it's now, as Rich knows, it's like a 12, 13-page missive that people have to print out. It's so long or put to the side to read. And it's funny because I never write that much, but I feel like there's so much happening in the quarter that I have to put that much down.
It's like if instead of tweeting, if instead of following me on Twitter, like once a quarter, I just sent you a PDF of all of my tweets that I would have sent during the quarter.
Well, it's funny, Ari, because you asked me one time about why don't I tweet, and I'm like, I don't tweet because I do it this way, so you and I do it the extreme different ways, right? You're putting something out every 10 minutes. And by the way, I'm looking at the news every day, dropping stuff in here, editing it, and then when the 75th day of the quarter, when it starts to come to the end, I sort of go through it, I sort of edit it, and sort of take stuff out. And then this time around, I had a blast because I started dropping everything into ChatGPT and Bard. As Rich knows, I like Bard better these days. And I got to tell you, Ari, it changed everything for me.
How so?
The summaries it allowed me to get were unbelievable. My first section is always publishers, and I had 40 or 50 bullet points to the publishers, and I was trying to figure out how do I put these into different buckets. So after a couple different prompts on Bard and ChatGPT, it broke it down into 5 different categories. I consolidated it to 4, and I broke all my publisher stuff into 4 different categories.
Wow, that's great. I mean, I think we'll talk more about the effect of AI on publishing, but it's cool that you're a case study right there.
It's cool he picked. I don't know if you call it this. It's an exclusive. He's more of a Google Bard fan than a ChatGPT fan. It's VHS and Betamax all over again.
Oh yeah, I didn't catch that. So you got access to Bard early. You're on the privilege list.
Yes, and then I actually want to change my name from MSG to Chat MSG or GPT or GPT MSG. I'm trying to figure out which one.
Rich, do you read the MSG newsletter?
Our family gathers around and then we read it together. Yeah, it's well, I see versions of it, during the quarter, and but when it comes out, yeah, of course, we read it. It's mandatory reading here at the Daily Mail, and a quarter is an interesting length of time. I talked to MSG quite a bit. Even I am surprised by things that he lists out there that I didn't catch or that I forgot happened, earlier in the quarter. So I think the readership on MSG, you could say, expands with each one because people send it around.
Yeah, so there's a couple things about this, Ari and Rich, you'll love this. So one of the questions you asked me, Ari, is who is the audience? And every time I write this, I write it for one person in mind, which happens to be Rich. Like, he is the epitome of, I'm being serious, he is the epitome of
You're going to say what?
He is the epitome of my audience, number one. Number two is I send it out to, I think it's up to like 3,200 people every quarter.
Wow.
I get a 50 or 60% open rate sometimes. I'll send it out once on a Monday or Tuesday, get 12, 13, 14, 1,500 opens. Then I send it again on Saturday morning at 7 a.m., get another 300 for the people who didn't want to read it during the week. The thing that drives me crazy is when people unsubscribe. I get you're laughing. I get 4 or 5 unsubscribes every quarter. I'm like, why are you unsubscribing to this? I only send it out 4 times a year. The effort it takes you to unsubscribe.
It is such a thing.
Yes.
It's so true. Like, with Marketecture, we use MailChimp. So every day I get a little email from MailChimp, new subscribers, unsubscribers. And I really hold a grudge against someone who unsubscribes for my...
So do I.
I'm going to see them at a conference and be like, you unsubscribed. You.
Oh, did you? Sometimes I want to put them back in.
How does one subscribe? I thought it's like an exclusive list. You just have to know you to subscribe, right? Is there a webpage?
I had a website called whatisawhappen.com. I don't update it all the time, but in there you can actually...
Okay, the good plug. One of the things I really like about it, the newsletter, is that it just sort of brings to the surface trends. I mean, that's the title, What I Saw Happen. And it makes you think. Like, some things are obvious. Some things like, yeah, no duh, that's happening. And other things like, oh, okay, I didn't know that was happening. I think we're just going to jump in. What we plan to do is I'm going to go through some of the bullet points in your last newsletter, and we'll do some hot takes about what we're seeing here.
Before we go, Ari, one more thing. I hate MailChimp. I think the service is horrible. It has the worst stats ever. I pay $80 a month for it to send something out 4 times a year. After this meeting, I'm going to cancel mine, take my list and upgrade it, move it over to you, and I'll give you like $20 a month.
I use MailChimp, I use SendGrid, I use a lot of things. It's amazing that in 2023 there's not a single email program that does everything you need as a business, but that's a different conversation. So let's jump into the hot takes. Publishers are concerned that traffic continues to decrease, often due to Google algorithm changes. Matt, why don't you start by explaining what you're seeing, and then maybe Rich can give us your point of view.
I saw this happen more this quarter than other quarters. Certain publishers I'm working with have seen traffic go down as of late. And there's a lot of concern / finger pointing that Google always does something new, SEO changes, and the traffic goes down and the publishers feel handcuffed.
Yeah. Isn't Meta a big part of that, though? Is it really Google, or is it Google, Meta, Twitter, everyone?
Oh, I think it's mostly Google. I'd ask Rich what he thinks.
We're very fortunate that most of our traffic comes direct. So Google's important, and obviously Meta's important, but we can have a good day with Google, a bad day with Google. We're really more concerned with the direct traffic, because those people who come direct to the homepage or open up the app see significantly more pages per visit, than a Google visit at 1.2 or Meta visit at 1.4, or vice versa, pages per visit. Every quarter, or a couple times, big once a year, the algorithm changes, Google rolls out, and everyone holds their breath and wonders whether or not they're going to get hit. There's really not a lot of understanding as to what's what the goal of it is, and the SEO guys meet up at the bars that SEO guys go to or whatever, and they try to those are fun bars, and they try to find out, or they try to read the tea leaves, what happened.
The SEO guys go to a bar that's called Bar, Tavern, Sports Bar, cool place, local place.
Yeah, it's dark. And
sorry, that was an old RCO joke.
So it's people. Some sites that are very dependent on it, really can get killed by it. It's and then I think the difficult part is there's no way to really lobby, especially for smaller sites, to say to Google, hey, we really got hurt, what happened?
Yeah.
That was something that when the Australian regulators, they started discussing Facebook and Google, and they put forth their first draft of regulation. There was a pay for content was part of it, but there were some rules for behavior, some operating guidelines in there too. And one of those was, to give more insight into algorithm changes and to give a platform or a way for people to question when they had gotten hit. That was sort of wadded out in the final version.
And I think also Rich made a great point that Google flyby traffic sort of sees 1.1, 1.2 pages per visit.
Right.
And that's not a way for publishers to build websites long term.
I think it's a way to introduce your brand to people, and hopefully they find you. And for us, if people find an article and then they go back, get to the homepage, they'll come back directly to the homepage, and they'll become a dedicated or an addicted user. So I think of Google more as a way to introduce the brand to more readers. So I think it's a really important moment in time, and perhaps will be covered more in next quarter's edition. But Facebook's been saying for a long time that they're getting out of the news business. They don't want news. They won't promote news. They can't moderate it. They're tired of being blamed for it, and it's really happening. Right, the news stories are not getting promoted. That doesn't have legs. They don't have the legs they used to have. They'll run with sports. They'll run with lifestyle. They'll run with beauty, whatever. Anything that's close to news. Kanye is not going to get, stories about Kanye are not entertainment. They're news, and they're really adamant about it. And I think the move away from the shutting down of Instant Article this month is just a further sign that they don't want to use the platform or the templates that were optimized for news. So
yeah, it's like a perfect storm, right? Between Google's algorithm changes, Meta not being interested in news, Twitter being chaotic, and new platforms like TikTok really not having a click-out model at all.
Yeah, Instagram too.
While we're on the subject, let's go to a subject that's not on the list, which is should news publishers be paid by ChatGPT and Bard for scraping their content?
Absolutely, 100%. They should have been paid 20 years ago by Google when Google scraped their content for search. 100% should be paid.
Okay, well, that's two different things. I agree with the first part, disagree with the second part. Rich, what do you think?
I think it's going to happen. Both the training of the AI engines on the content and then the presenting aspects of the parts of the content. Again, if you're dependent on search, it's really going to hurt because the answer is going to be provided in the response. There's not going to be a 10 links out.
If search shifted to AI, and let's say publishers were paid to be part of the index the AI uses, but they got far fewer clicks, would that be okay, or it kind of depends on the dollars and cents?
Yeah, it depends on the dollars and cents, and it depends on what the value of exclusive content. I think the ramifications of what can be done with it, and I know we're moving off of the original question, but depending on the model, it can work, depending on how dependent a publisher is on search. It goes back to my point before. If you think of search as a way to introduce your brand and your content to new users, that's the piece that's going to be lost here. And that's the one that's going to be hard. It's not a straight page view to page view, comparison. It's a user who becomes a returning user who becomes a dedicated and addicted user.
All right, next hot take from Matt's newsletter. Publishers need Apple to build a third-party ad network since ATT killed the ads and the iOS business. You're hearing from publishers, Matt, that they need Apple to create a third-party app?
Want would be great. And it's not necessarily an app as much as they need Apple to get involved with advertising so the publishers can garner a higher CPM from those users on the iOS platform.
Right, because basically CPMs are down and maybe continuing to go down because the ad model is broken.
As iOS takes 50, 60, 70% of the impressions across the publisher. So they need Apple to sort of somehow identify these people and figure out how to monetize them slightly.
Assuming they have a fair revenue share, which we don't know.
Well, you know what the revenue share is going to be, Ari? It's going to be 30%, right?
Yeah.
Their take rate will be 30%. That's obvious.
Yeah.
And Eric was, when I think in one of your previous episodes, Eric was, he's really the most knowledgeable and insightful guy on this. I thought he was excellent.
Eric Seufert, he knows more about in-app advertising. He's forgotten more than I would ever know.
But I do think it would come. And I think, the problem is the content rate with ATT is just so low, and it's much, much worse than GDPR. And it's hurt a lot of businesses. It's hurt us. It's hurt obviously Facebook and Snap and others. And if if Apple came out with something, I think it's going to work like Privacy Sandbox. Probably, I think they will come out with it. And when they do, we'll grit our teeth. And they'll look like the White Knights, and we'll all say thanks. And
Thank you very much.
Probably
Thanks for the ads.
Yeah. Thanks for helping us out. Yeah.
All right. Publishers are worried about SSPs, i.e., the EMX Yahoo news is a blip of more consolidation to come. We've talked about this on the podcast previously, but I'm really interested in hearing how publishers think about it. Is it just about potentially getting stiffed or on a bill or having a clawback on a payment, or is there more to it than that?
Well, that's part of it. I think during tough times, you got to be really careful with it. You got to watch as a publisher. You got to watch your receivables, and you got to check your contracts and make sure you understand what could happen, what your exposure is. Don't let it get too far, outside of the bounds of what you have in your agreements. I think it's a tough time for SSPs. They get stretched out. They're in a very tough spot. They get stretched out. They really have to be like banks with the cash flow. So
yeah,
they've been through it. I have a lot of faith in them. I think the concern is too that they're dealing with the SPs that may be struggling, and then there are some, if they don't get paid, depending on the SSP, there may be some clawbacks there. So.
Yeah, a big DSP going under would be really pretty terrible. But it's never really happened or hasn't happened for a long time. The EMX question is like, where did the money go? The EMX just seems to have lost all of its money that it owed publishers, but it's not clear why. I don't understand exactly what happened there. But maybe someday we'll have the full story. I'm just going to move on. I want to hit these fast. So maybe, Matt, you can talk about this one. Publishers are really figuring out vertical video and how to make money from the content. Currently, it's difficult because there's not much programmatic ad demand. This is a sexy topic. What are you hearing?
So, vertical video is controlled by TikTok and the other big players.
Yep.
Eventually, I think publishers are going to try to figure out how to get vertical video on their mobile users. And is there a way for a third party to come in and create vertical video, have content come in there, and then feed it through publishers as opposed to going through TikTok? Is there white space out there in the ecosystem that publishers and ad tech friendly companies could figure out to compete against TikTok and those?
Right. So are they doing anything? I mean, I see.
I've heard
the Washington Post.
I've heard bits and pieces of it happening, and part of the reason I write this newsletter is to get people to think about things and actually, having, CEOs take the newsletter and talk with their senior management team about what I write here. It's like, this is how you think about new ideas. Like, let's learn from the previous quarter to think about what's going to happen in the future.
I know when I was at Beeswax, we talked to Google about vertical video coming through programmatic pipes, and it was a couple of years ago, and there was just no demand or supply. So I don't know how that's changed, but it's definitely an issue.
But there's there's white space here.
But I think the vertical video is a result. Is more the symptom. The change is the short form video. Change is the move to that's changed. It's changed everything. Is just how popular and the short form video has become. So everyone's had to change what they produce to work that way. There's been debates internally. Can you chop something up, or do you have to make it specifically for that platform or that length of time? You can't shoot a 3-minute video and cut it down to short form. There are all those sort of questions, all that sort of testing going on. As far as running ads through it, it's hard to put an ad before something that's so short. And sooner or later, I guess the question will come down to attribution, right? How do you, if there are 3 videos and then there's an ad, who gets attribution or some rev share on that?
Yeah, I think the ad before the short video problem has been around since the early days of YouTube, and it's not really a solvable problem. It's just a problem. So I think that publishers need to think about potentially non-advertising ways of dealing with that, or
sponsored or sponsored.
Yeah, sponsors. Yeah. Okay, so next point: publishers are trying to capture more email addresses and use it to increase revenue, but they're not sure it will materialize into revenue, and it would potentially replace third-party cookies. So this makes sense. This is one of those evergreen things. I think publishers have been trying to capture email addresses for 20 years, but with the impending loss of cookies and with the Trade Desk talking about UID2 all the time, it seems like it's a priority. So what are they actually doing? Has anything changed?
This is a broader question around identity. What identity solution? What are you going to need to play in that, in that game? I'm not so sure it's going to be email. everyone has an opinion on this. But if you want to collect email, if you think email is the thing, and with proxy emails and all that happening, who knows if it's the thing? But if that's what you want to do, interestingly, now when yields are so low, the opportunity cost is probably not as high as it once was to take that chance and put up a hurdle or to make that request. In the end, it comes down to the same thing as you said it's been for 20 years: is the value exchange.
Right.
If people are going to unsubscribe from MSG's newsletter, which with all of its value, then what hope do we have? But no, it's. I think now you're starting to see it. But where do you get it? We get the emails we get mainly from people who join to take part in the community. And if you have a strong community and people want to comment or be engaged with it, I think that's the best place to get it.
Yeah. I mean, you look at some successes like Semaphore, which is, very email-centric and seems to have done quite a good job getting people to subscribe right off the bat, or the New York Times with their, vertical approach where they have a cooking newsletter versus a, finance newsletter, et cetera. There's definitely some opportunity to innovate here.
And as I said, the opportunity cost is probably lower. It's definitely lower as yields go away. That losing a page view or cutting short a visit, doesn't have the cost it did a little while ago. So,
Ari, did you just say the success of Semaphore?
Yeah, and success at Semaphore in driving email subscriptions.
Okay.
It seems like I don't know how they are successful as a company, which actually that is a great segue into your next bullet. So you really threw down the gauntlet on this one.
I had to throw down some gauntlet, right, and make it more interesting.
I'm gonna read this verbatim. I am not sure we will see another successful digital publisher emerge in the next 3 to 5 years.
If I look at the point above, I think there's only been 2 really successful digital publishers in the last 3 to 5 years, and that's Axios and Forbes Marketplace, what my friend Asher did over there. Now, I'm sure I forgot something or missing something. I don't know if, Ari, you know any other successful digital publisher that emerged in the past couple of years?
Marketecture TV, maybe.
Okay. But my point is there's not many, and I think with everything happening with AI, I don't think you'll see a successful one emerge until AI creates something interesting and changes the way. So you won't see a successful traditional digital publisher emerge, but you might see a successful AI-driven initiative of publishing emerge in the next couple of years.
I was going to bridge to that topic as well. I think having AI to help the editorial process, to write run-of-the-mill articles, that's going to happen, but it's not really interesting. It's really just a way of reducing costs to produce content. But the next step of, something new and unique that's truly AI-driven, but still has editorial, I think that's where you could see some real innovation and some disruption, frankly, where people can get their news or get their recipes or get their health advice in a totally different way than what they're doing now with the traditional content model.
Yeah, I think of it in 3 ways. Yes, there's opportunities around efficiency, right, and how content's created or summarized, or even what keywords or best keywords are selected for the meta tagging, whatever. There will be efficiency options. And the next topic is one we talked about before: is there a licensing opportunity, or will there be licensing for the engines from the engines? That's the second, and the third is the one that you just discussed, which is, are there new products? And are there new products that will come about that will change the way people interact with content? And I think you're starting to see that a bit with some of the conversation engines. I think you'll see that from Meta with Messenger or with DMs, where there'll be conversations between the reader, or in this case, the customer and the content. So the products and changes that'll come about like that.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that is interesting. And so they're there. So people will, as far as MSG's coming, somebody could come out that's really great at that and change the game.
Okay, so let's transition to the news of the week. So Matt is the news of the quarter. We're going to...
All right, I do have to say, though, your 4 stories here for your news of the week never really make my news of the quarter. So, we're going down 2 different paths, which is fascinating. Me probably more from the publisher's perspective and you more from the ad tech perspective.
Yeah, I'm like Scotty in the engine room, trying to make the ad serve on time, and you're Captain Kirk trying to talk to the aliens. So with that terrible metaphor, let's jump in. All right, so starting with the ongoing conversation we've had several weeks in a row here on this podcast about DSPs and SSPs colliding. There was a story this week in Digiday about Magnite going direct. So Magnite apparently is talking to advertisers and agencies about booking their programmatic guarantee deals and otherwise having their demand in Magnite and potentially either bypassing the DSP or sort of enhancing the relationship between Magnite and the advertisers. Is this big news, or is this just continuing a trend that's going to be in the news for the next couple of years?
It's a continuation of a trend that's been happening for years. If you look at the top DSPs, right, Google DV360 has a DSP and an SSP. The Trade Desk has been doing it, right? Criteo has been doing it. Amazon has been doing it. They're all doing it. I think it's just being amplified in the news slightly here. And it's like, it took them long enough to do it. The question is, does Magnite and Pubmatic and Index, do they go and buy and or start a DSP? And I remember Ari used to say, like, oh, if I had more money, I would just start 5 more DSPs, and there's your 5 people you sell them to.
Yeah, exactly. I think there's 2 different sort of things going on here. One is that there's this conflict over take rates between the Trade Desk has sort of started this war over take rates with their OpenPath. And the second thing is that because there is a quickly growing segment of the market that is using programmatic guaranteed, which, in case you're not that involved in the day-to-day, programmatic guaranteed means every single impression that comes through to the DSP needs to be purchased at a pre-negotiated price. And when you're doing that, the DSP doesn't really do very much. The DSP acts like a dumb ad server, frankly. And the obvious question that comes to mind is, why am I paying a percentage of media for a tech that's not really doing very much? And so I think programmatic guaranteed has raised a lot of people's eyebrows about whether the game changes between DSPs, SSPs, publishers, and advertisers. So that's my quick take on this.
Right. I think this has been happening for a while, but I think OpenPath is a game changer. It's a shot across the bow for some of the SSPs who must be feeling some pressure. But this is really a big step in just disintermediating exchanges. Even if OpenPath's not running all the Trade Desk spend, it shows the intentions.
Rich, are you in OpenPath?
No.
Why not?
Don't want to say. Well, I think this has been going, and since the move to first price auction, that was a big step that sort of changed the game for SSPs. It's coming that way too. And they're going to put more pressure on the SSPs to create true value and justify their take rate. I think with some of the sustainability efforts what Brian's doing, Scope 3, and just with SPO, with the supply path optimization, there's a lot going on there, a lot of changes that are happening. And that goes back to your point before. You just got to keep an eye on and work with your partners who, I feel great fondness for, and our SSP partners, and they've helped us over the years. I've always thought their intentions were, the people like Index, Andrew, and those guys. I think they help. I also don't know what happens to the smaller guys, smaller publishers.
They have to have SSPs because the DSP hasn't produced those relationships with all this long tail.
So it's important for all of us that the SSPs are healthy.
Yeah, which brings us to our next interesting topic. So my friend Tom Tiscari runs a newsletter called Quo Vadis. I don't know what that means. Tom is a very intellectual person. He probably has a long, interesting story about why it's called that. And he writes these very dense, intensely mathematical posts about ad tech. I'd recommend subscribing. We might have him on the podcast at some point, but he's too smart. It'll make me look bad. So anyway, the point being, this week's issue got me thinking, because what he did was he tried to derive the take rates of Magnite and Pubmatic using their financial statements. Take rate is often confused with gross margin in our business, but take rate is a much better way to describe it. It's the percentage of every dollar that goes through the pipes of these systems that is kept by the SSP. And take rates have not been disclosed for Magnite and Pubmatic for quite some time. Magnite very publicly reduced its take rate over the last 5 years as they removed extra hidden fees and things like that. Long story short, so Tom estimates the take rate of these companies using publicly available information, And he comes up with a range for Magnite of 16 to 22% and a range for Pubmatic of 22 to 30%. And you can read the methodology he used. The methodology makes a lot of sense. These numbers come in a little higher than what I would think.
Okay, so here's my hot take. Number one, I had to read his missive 3 times before I understood it. So number two, I dropped it into Bard, and Bard told me the summary was Pubmatic and Magnite are going to merge. And number three is his numbers feel right. You know, what those take rates are. And my philosophy on take rates, if you're Pubmatic or Rubicon, you know, my take rate's going to be as high as I can make it until someone slaps me on the hand and says you're doing a bad job. Right? So take advantage of it. And I do think, and Rich and I were talking about this before, I do think that the analysts who follow these companies should make the companies disclose take rate in the financial statements as opposed to someone trying to drive it.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I think this really, it's interesting that we go back to when Rubicon went public, and I think they had to disclose it then, or it was in their book, you know, when they were doing the roadshow. And I think everyone was shocked with how much they would take from both sides. So that's when I think people really started paying attention to it. And it's gotten hidden more over the years. Although, as he notes in here, they have, and you mentioned, I think they have been talking about bringing it down since when they've done some of these acquisitions, they've
Right.
been a little bit more open about it. It's the age-old question of how much does the publisher get out of every dollar?
But it's not as bad as Rocket Fuel's take rate is 63% back.
I think the Magnite number seems a little low to me, partially because they have a hybrid business where they do manage service through SpotX acquisition. It's interesting that he put numbers on the piece of paper to get us talking.
Because we forget about it. I think most publishers don't, you know, day to day, they don't really think about it. They look at, you know, they try to compare against benchmarks, but they're looking at their net, you know, periodically, you know, they look at the net and they wonder why it's going down or why it's up or why one partner seems to be doing better than others. And that's what I think publishers talk about. It's only when there's things like this come out periodically that we're reminded again, hey, we're only getting 25 cents on the dollar.
Yeah, I mean, last week we talked about how Sovereign announced they had a 0% take rate because they charge publishers for other things. It just gets you kind of thinking, like, what if Google, you know, doubled or tripled the price of GAM but made AdX free? That would be an interesting SPO move, right? It'd be very, very interesting to see what would happen if someone tried. Maybe not Google's not the right person to try it. Maybe Smart is, but it's worth a little creativity in these complex worlds. All right, next, Lou Paskalis, who I think we all know, longtime advertising leader. He was publicly involved in several contentious conversations with Twitter's new management team, if you want to call it that. Anyway, Lou got a new job that I thought was noteworthy, which is he's the chief strategy officer at Adfontes Media, which I haven't really heard of. But Adfontes is a company that helps brands feel more confident advertising with news publishers. So effectively trying to reverse the trend of advertisers avoiding hard news or using some of the verification vendors to block hard news, trying to get more money flowing to legitimate news outlets. So I think that's interesting. Maybe more interesting about the company than necessarily Lou's move, but I thought it was worth talking about. Have either of you run into Adfontes Media before?
Yeah, because the media bias chart, the little upside down U, that I love looking at that all the time about positioning all news publications where they're on the chart. And I didn't realize those two are related.
Yeah. Oh, so Adfontes is one who puts out that chart?
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't realize that. Okay. That gives good perspective. Right.
It's got two axes. Right? It's got political bias is the x-axis, and then the overall quality as defined as original reporting or opinion or analysis. That's their y-axis.
Well, and if you think about it, you know, I think in the article Ari, there's like 60 analysts who work for the media bias chart and put it together, looking at articles. Like AI feels like it could do that pretty soon, very easily, and make that a whole lot more efficient.
Yeah, that's the truth. Get AI to rank the news that we should be buying ads on.
I could probably write a prompt right now and figure that out. It's not that far.
Rich, how does this affect your day-to-day business? Advertisers avoiding hard news. Is this like top 5 problems that you have?
It is. It comes around particularly during certain events, right? During COVID, and it was more of a UK thing. There was a real move away from blacklisting or keyword blocking on anything having with COVID, and that actually went to the Parliament. There was discussion and with the agencies and with the tech platforms and with the advertisers say you've got to support news. It's important for democracy, et cetera. But I think the interesting thing here is that, again, we forget, and I've been in the business long enough to remember, is this really what is going on, or is this really a sort of a red herring? Because 20 years ago, I think many advertisers started buying the user and not the site. I mean, you go back to Dakota and Aminet and tracking users, or trying to target users. So I think that who a user is has, and maybe less than the context. I think that's still true. That may change. I think Amazon's trying to change it. I think really going back to context a bit. It's an issue, especially in big news events when they don't want to buy news. That's why, as a publisher, I think it's important to have a wide breadth of content. If you want to buy hard news, we've got sports, we've got lifestyle, we've got travel and things like that. And we can find the readers you want to read in those other areas if that's something that's concerning to you. But at the end of the day, we really do think it's important that advertisers support hard news. And that means advertising on those pages. Look, you don't want to be out plane crash. We understand that. And we can, move it around. But it's important that news is supported. And big events, it comes back up.
And if I could give a plug, we just did at Marketecture TV an in-depth interview with Mark Zagorski, CEO of Double Verify. He had thoughts about this, and I thought it was a very informative interview. Also a plug, next week, I believe we're publishing an interview I just did with Dr. Mark Gerther, the head of Uber advertising. He goes into a lot of depth about what Uber's doing in advertising, how they're planning on opening it up to programmatic, and a lot of other really interesting subjects. So I would highly recommend subscribing to our newsletter at Marketecture TV and hearing about the latest interviews we do. On that, I think we're going to close it up. So, Richard, Matt, thank you so much for being here. This is a great conversation about publishers and about all the challenges they're facing. I hope everyone reaches out to Matt and gets on this secret newsletter that you can't subscribe to. All right. Thank you for being here, Matt and Richard.
Thanks, Ari.
Thanks, Ari.
Thank you for subscribing to Marketecture. New interviews are added every week at marketecture.tv and your favorite podcasting app.